South Carolina judge has ruled that former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows must appear for testimony in an Atlanta area 2020 election meddling investigation. During the court hearing, the judge said he believes Meadows was, quote, material and necessary to the investigation and that the state of Georgia is assuring not to cause undue hardship to him, end quote. Meadows' attorney says they plan to appeal the ruling. Here to break that down, and we're going to talk about Hunter in just a second. But on this one, Thane Rosenbaum from Touro University, how do you read this? Is he going to be forced to testify?
Well, he was compelled by a South Carolina judge. Remember, Meadows is not a resident, a citizen of Georgia, so he can't be compelled unless his state where he lives compels him. Now, in Atlanta investigation, by the way, Bob, New Mexico sent one of its citizens, and Colorado said one of its citizens must be compelled. But generally speaking, it requires the state in which you live to honor the subpoena of another state, unless you are a resident of that other state. The Georgians are saying, well, he was very much involved in the attempts to meddle in the 2020 election.
He was on the call. He was on the call with President Trump.
They're also saying, Bob, this is a key thing too, Bob. They're also saying that he traveled to with.
Okay.
Right. So that the fact that he traveled to observe the audit also created some contacts with Georgia.
I do want to move on to Hunter Biden. A former White House ethics chief called Joe Biden's actions, President Biden's actions, inappropriate. This after emails came to light which alleged that while Mr. Biden was still vice president, White House lawyers contacted his son Hunter and Hunter's business partner to discuss an audit letter. Joe Biden denied having business dealings with Hunter. Why discuss an audit? Give me your take on this. By the way, I noticed today that Jon Stewart, the comic, but he gets politically involved sometimes. He described it as corruption straight up, the fact that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. So, I mean, it is, and he points out how long it has taken the mainstream media to pay attention to this, and we did early on, but I do want to pay attention to it. What's your take on what's going on right now?
So the first question is, the vice president was audited, like so many of us, right? That's important. And he was audited for apparently some money that came from some business enterprise that his son was involved in. So but the vice president who is vice president said, I've had no business dealings with my son. Well, then why would the White House lawyer need to call Hunter up personally to find out about that business dealing if, in fact, in order to understand why the vice president may have not paid self-employment taxes? That's what the audit was about. So the first question is, why is a White House lawyer even calling his son? Certainly, if he has no business relationship, that's not appropriate to call his son. And secondly, if there is an audit, the White House lawyer shouldn't be calling at all. It should be a Vice President Biden's own attorney. But it does suggest that there was commingling of expenses. We're now learning from the laptop that they paid each other's expenses, Bob. They were commingling the same checking account. So even if it's just very hard to understand how the vice president, now president, says, I've had no business dealings with my son, when in fact the reason his haircut was paid by a checking account where his son was depositing money from his own business dealings.
Yeah, and playing ignorant doesn't work. We've seen him do that before. But just to get the timing, I mean, there were certain time that Joe Biden was a private citizen. And it's different. It could be sleazy business, but that doesn't mean it's illegal. But when he's vice president and his son is on the board of Burisma, it doesn't sound right. But at what point would they be breaking the law? Because it seems like if they're changing policy, that certainly seems like it would be illegal. I don't know if there's a law against that. It seems like there should be. But what would he have to do for that to be clearly unlawful?
Well, here's the one that really it's also a new piece of information dealing with this possible Chinese female spy, right? Because in that instance, Hunter Biden had a business associate, a woman from China, who graduated from a university that specialized in cyber attacks and Chinese foreign espionage. And she was advising Hunter Biden on a business deal where he would be selling natural gas to a Chinese energy company that went bankrupt, and the CEO was sentenced to prison for public corruption. Now, what's interesting there is that goes to the time that relationship continued well into the years that President Biden was just a private citizen. In fact, Bob, there's an interesting email in which the same potential spy who could have compromised the Biden family, in other words, why was a potential Chinese spy in any way involved in family businesses of the Bidens?
Right.
And there's even an email, Bob, in which she says to Hunter, I think you should try to get your father to run for president. I can help him with the Chinese. At that point, Bob, he's a private citizen. He's not even the vice president.
Yeah,
so there's the question of, that the question of being compromised by a foreign agent is another piece of this laptop that we will someday perhaps find out about.
Yeah, I don't want China helping our candidates running for president. I kind of want them not involved at all. Thane Rosenbaum, a New Yorker, because he didn't even flinch, didn't miss a beat when those sirens were going off outside his premises there. So Thane Rosenbaum.
You heard that?
I did hear that, and I'm impressed. Thane Rosenbaum, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, coming up, we're kind